Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I thought, we're all here for the same reason. Let's go ahead and start with some of the boring stuff that nobody ever wants to talk about. The absolutely mundane. I am a big proponent of checking the mundane before deciding that anything is paranormal. And if you've been with me for any period of time, you are aware that I have brought up on a regular basis that we need to check for the mundane. Here's the problem. Not a lot of people want to do that. And even if they do that, it doesn't make for great YouTube videos or great TV. So you're not going to see a lot of it. So what is it exactly that you should do if you think that your house is haunted? Now, I have a checklist. It is a checklist that I use for people who, come to me and say, hey, I think I might have a ghost. I usually give them this checklist. I highly encourage other investigators to do the same thing. And I highly encourage people who personally believe that their house might be haunted to go through this checklist on their own and decide if their house is actually haunted on their own before they start contacting anybody. At the end of the list, we'll also talk about contacting people. But for now, let's go over the checklist of some of the mundane things that you should check before you decide that your house is haunted. Before we go any further, you're probably going to hear my air conditioner. I do apologize, but I'm not turning it off. It is hot as hell in here. So anyway, here we go. So first thing we're going to start out with is we're going to talk about the house and environmental factors. Okay, what do I mean by that? Okay, well, let's start out with the structural stuff. Okay, you want to inspect any of your floorboards. Do you have creaky spots in your floor? I think most of us do. If your house is older than a year old, you probably have creaky spots. You should know where those are. Is anybody walking around your house and hitting those creaky spots? Are they settling? Do they creak on their own at random times? If your foundation is starting to settle a little bit, do they just randomly creak and snap? We have a cracking sound that happens every once in a while in our house, and my mom is convinced that it's a ghost. And I'm not so sure. It happens pretty much every day. There's just a little knock somewhere in the house. I'm trying to figure out what I need to look into to check on that. I don't think it's a ghost, but my mother seems to, I think she's borderline on whether or not it could be. So from there, you want to check for drafts. Okay, so you're going to look windows, doors, attics, chimneys, crawl spaces, things like that. Any place where there could be any slight breeze that's coming through. And this is going to be in particular if you've got things that are moving or if you've got cold spots, things like that. You want to check and make sure that you don't have any drafts or breezes coming through. And that includes when you've got the air conditioning on. A lot of people have drafts that come in from below their doors. So if you've got all the doors closed and you've got something in a hallway that keeps moving, pieces of paper flying off of countertops and all, you might want to check to see if your heating and air conditioning is actually blowing out from underneath the doors. Okay, you also want to listen for plumbing noises and other kinds of HVAC sounds and things like that. A lot of people have plumbing that rattles, especially if you're in an older home, and a lot of times the older homes are the ones that everybody thinks are haunted. You want to check your plumbing. You want to make sure that you don't have any knocking or banging. You don't have an issue with your water heater, things of that nature. Your foundations are going to continue settling. You want to make sure that what you're hearing isn't something shifting or that something hasn't cracked and broken. Things along those lines. I know that there are still homes in the United States, and I know in other countries especially, houses that have radiators. I grew up in a house that had radiators. I have central heating now, but when I grew up we had radiators, and I know that the radiators could make a lot of noises. And a lot of times they were knocking sounds. Sometimes they came in threes. So I always tell people, do you have a radiator anywhere in your house? Is the radiator still functional? If the radiator is still functional, you might want to check to see if the knocking sounds are coming from that radiator. Okay, so from there you want to move on to your electrical. I highly recommend that you have somebody come in to do electrical. You might want to have somebody come in and check your plumbing as well and your HVAC and all that. If you can afford to have people come in who specialize in those fields, it would be highly recommended that you do that. Have somebody come in and check your electrical, your plumbing, your HVAC, whatever the case may be. But especially in old homes, If you're in an old home, you need to get your electrical inspected anyway, just to make sure that you don't have nub and tube or some kind of things like that. I used to watch all those, like the Property Brothers and stuff like that. The amount of times that these people would go into these homes and they would start renovating and they would find modern electricity that was somehow like wired into nub and tube, which is extremely dangerous. But you want to check to make sure that you don't have some kind of weird hack job like that was done by a previous homeowner or the current homeowner if they're crazy. You want to make sure that you don't have something like that, because that could cause weird electrical sounds. It could cause flickering lights. It could even cause smells. One of the things I like to point out to people is when they smell cigarette or cigar smoke and nobody in the house smokes, the very, very first thing you need to do, and I mean right now, is have somebody come in and check your electrical. If you're smelling those things, that could be an indication that you've got a serious problem that could lead to an electrical fire. So if you're smelling cigarettes or cigars, please, for the love of God, call an electrician, not a ghost hunter. Please. I see these things all the time. People kind of just poo-poo me off because what a party pooper I am. But please, for the love of God, if you smell cigarettes or cigars, call an electrician. Trust me on this. Call an electrician. Now, you also need to have, for the same reason, inspect outlets and wiring for signs of aging or faults. Again, you want to make sure that your electrical is up to date, it's current, it's in code, things like that. You want to make sure that you don't have burn marks on your electrical outlets. You want to make sure that you don't have any weird smells, things like that, because again, that could cause a lot of issues with your electrical, as well as potentially be a life-threatening hazard. You also want to test your electromagnetic fields. This is where your K2 meter comes in. Yes, everybody poo-poos the K... Well, not everybody, but a lot of people poo-poo the K2 meter as a ghost hunting tool. It actually can be really helpful in this scenario. Break out your K2 meter and start finding out... Get a baseline. You go through your house and need a baseline. You go through, where in the house is the electromagnetic fields the highest? Fantastic. When I did it at my apartment, I haven't done it in my house yet, but when I did it at my old apartment, the microwave, the refrigerator, things like that, the electrical box in the hallway, all those stuff gave off a lot of EMF readings. Made my K2 meter go absolutely insane. That's going to cause an issue if I'm trying to ghost hunt in that area. Because anytime you get within a certain range of any of those objects, of course your K2 meter is going to go off. You are right in an obvious electromagnetic field. This is why when you go into any location, and this is for ghost hunters as well, before you do anything, when you're doing all your setup and you're putting all your cameras around and all your equipment and everything, break out your K2 meter and get a baseline. The K2 meter can actually be useful in a ghost hunt because, I mean, in all honesty, we don't know if ghosts give off EMF or not. They can be used successfully on a ghost hunt, but you have to have a baseline first. If you go through the house and you have certain spots that let off more than others, mark those down on a chart somewhere. You should have a chart written out of the property, and you mark those spots down. And you take note of that when you're actually investigating. Now, if you're in a spot where there's no reading, and all of a sudden it's reading, you may want to start paying attention to that area, because that is outside of your baseline. So make sure that you have a baseline, and make sure that you know, before you start investigating, where the hot spots are. That's what you use your K2 meter for. The next thing you want to move on to is environmental factors. So the first thing you want to do, and a lot of hauntings come from this, and I know everybody gets all angry because you pointed out, but it's the truth. Get yourself a really good carbon monoxide detector. You should have one on each floor of your house. Try to get one that actually plugs in if you can. They have them where you just plug them into your outlet and you just, there it is. Get yourself a good carbon monoxide detector. And then pay attention to it. Does it start sounding? Maybe you need to get a little help if it does. If it does start sounding, and in the time period before it started sounding is when you started seeing things and hearing weird noises, you may want to take into consideration that it could be the carbon monoxide that's causing a problem. Okay? Get that situation rectified, and then move on from there. If everything stops, if you get your house fixed, if you've had a carbon monoxide issue and you get all of that situation fixed and you come back to the house and you continue having issues and your carbon monoxide detectors are no longer sounding, okay, then you might want to start looking into some other things. But always, the first thing I always tell people when they say, oh, I keep seeing this thing down the hallway, get a carbon monoxide detector. Just get one. Swallow your pride and get a carbon monoxide detector. It could save your life. Now, you also want to check for mold growth. And that could be just about anywhere. I know people want to say, you know, around windows and things like that. Check everywhere. If you're starting to hear and see things, you want to check especially for black mold. You never know where that stuff is going to start growing. Obvious places would be your kitchen, bathroom, around doors and windows, things like that. But check everywhere. Start checking behind furniture. Start checking around where your dogs or cats have their water bowls. Things like that. You want to check any place where there could be a possibility of moisture. Check all of your ceilings, around your ceilings. Go into your attic, go into your basement, go into your closets. All of that stuff, start checking for black mold. If you do have a black mold issue or if you've got some other mold growing in your house, go ahead and get that handled professionally. Get all of that removed. And again, if all of it's cleared and you're good and you don't see it turning back up after a period of time and you're still hearing and seeing things, then go ahead and talk to somebody. Now, you also want to check for things like infrasound. Okay, there's a lot of debate about infrasound. I'm not going to get too into infrasound because there are several people in the paranormal community who have talked about it in depth. There's one or two that have done it fairly recently. I think, was it the World of Mr. Gray that did one recently? I think it was the World of Mr. Gray that talked about infrasound very recently. I can't remember if it was him or Mythos. I'll look it up and I'll put a link down in the description. But one of those two talked about infrasound in depth recently, so I'm not going to go into it. Watch their videos and then check your surroundings for infrasound. A lot of debate about it, but it is a technique that's used in like Halloween haunts and things like that. It is something that gets used. It is a thing that could be happening in your space that you are unaware of. So you should be aware of those, and if you can eliminate them and then see if you're still having your issues, that would be optimal. Okay, your next step is going to be to check for pests, and you can have somebody come in to look for those. Pests that you could have issues with, it could be mice, rats, bats, squirrels, insects, things like that. And please do not discount your insects. You could have a termite issue. You would be surprised the amount of noise that bugs make. We have an issue right now with carpenter bees on my back steps because they're made out of wood. And I know that they're there because I can hear them. And they make this weird little scritchy, scratchy noise inside the wood. And it's astonishingly noisy. My dog can obviously hear it, but it's the fact that I can hear it. If that's happening in the walls of your house, and there's more than one, because my issue is one. They have one bee. Just one carpenter bee. Very angry little sucker, but there he is. He makes a lot of noise. If you've got a bunch of them, and there's a queen and everything else, I would imagine that noise would be something. And if you can't see it, you're going to get freaked out because it does sound like these weird little scritchy scratchies and weird noises. I'm assuming termites probably sound somewhat similar. And there's a whole other issue there. That is a problem that's way worse than ghosts. So you want to make sure of that. If you are hearing weird noises and running and thumping and scratching, you want to check and make sure you don't have rats or mice in your walls or in your attic or in your basement. You want to make sure that you don't have possums or raccoons or bats or God knows what. Anything that could possibly get into your house. And even if you think your house is locked down solid, I live in the South. Trust me, stuff can get in pretty easily and in the weirdest possible places. I used to have an issue in my apartment. We've got what they call wood roaches, and they're those big brown roaches, and they fly, and bastards used to come in through the fireplace. I swear to God, I sat there one day and just watched one drop out of the fireplace and go running across the living room. My God. But you would be surprised. They can slip in under the doors. They can slip in under the windows. Make sure you have an exterminator come in and they can check for pests. They can check for bugs. go ahead and do that, especially if you have an attic space or a basement space, because they love to hang out in those spaces. Okay, you also want to check for light anomalies that are actually coming from outside. Okay, so you want to watch out for outdoor lights, cars, planes, street lamps that create reflections or shadows. That is one of the easiest ones. You have a car come down the street, you don't realize it passes by, there's a mirror on your wall somewhere, the light momentarily hits the mirror, and it flashes on a wall in another room. And you automatically think that you just caught a light anomaly, and you didn't. It was just a reflection of somebody's headlights. So you want to check that. How do lights and everything outside hit inside your house? And you also want to check to see if you have any of these reflective surfaces. Do you have high gloss paint on your walls? Do you have mirrors? Do you have windows? Do you have decorations that have big pieces of glass in them? Do you have grandma's plate collection hanging on the wall someplace? Do you have a shot glass collection? Things like that could actually cause an issue with light reflection, especially coming from inside. I live in a cul-de-sac, which means that when cars come down here and they make a circle, there's a possibility that light is coming in through the front windows. I also live fairly near an airport. I'm only about maybe 2 miles from the airport. So when the planes come by over here, they come in kind of low. So every once in a while, I'll be sitting in my living room or something, and suddenly there's just headlights in my window, and it's some little, 2-seater plane that's coming in low and making horrible noises and flashing its lights into my window. So you need to assess that, and it could take a while to assess how that works. How are the lights coming in from the cars? And that's going to be your biggest issue with cars. How's light coming in from the cars? Do you have neighbors that walk their dogs using flashlights or headlamps? How is all of that reflecting into your house? What reflective items do you have around? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the personal health and mental state of the person. This includes you, this includes whoever you're going to be doing an investigation for, and you need to be honest with yourself and or the investigators. Unfortunately, a lot of the hauntings that you see, especially on YouTube, they seem to take advantage of people who are having a mental crisis. And it's obvious to everybody else, but for them, it's easy content. Okay, so you need to be honest with yourself. And if you have investigators coming in, you need to be honest with them if they ask as well. That does not mean that you have to tell anybody about your medical history. So if you have a paranormal team that comes in, you can tell them, I have a history of mental illness that may or may not cause hallucinations, or it causes, one of the side effects is ringing in my ears or something like that. You don't have to turn around and say, yeah, well, I'm, a bipolar schizophrenic, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to do any of that. Okay, you're not required to do that, but you do have to consider, at least for yourself, could it be a mental health thing? So what are we checking out for? You want to assess the sleep quality. Fatigue can heighten fear and confusion. So are you sleeping well at night? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you sleeping thoroughly? Okay, what I'm saying there is, do you have sleep apnea? Because if you have sleep apnea, you're not sleeping as well as you think you are. Okay, so if you're having these issues where you're hearing things and seeing things and getting creepy feelings and stuff like that, you need to talk to your doctor. One of the first things that they could do is they could do a sleep study to ensure that you don't have sleep apnea. It's a good thing to do anyway, because sleep apnea can cause all kinds of medical conditions that could actually be fatal. So you want to definitely make sure that you are sleeping well, you are getting enough sleep, you aren't just subsisting off of coffee, and that you don't have sleep apnea. Consider stress, grief, and emotional strain is influencing perception. For one thing, there's a lot of people that believe that energy is stored and it can actually be created. So if you have a certain stressor or a certain anxiety or something like that, you could be creating this issue for yourself, whether it's manifesting in reality or whether your brain is telling you that it's seeing it and it's not really. Grief can also cause some of these issues. It's one of the things I used to do. I had a woman at some point told me that she had a feeling that her house was haunted, and her daughter had died 6 months prior, and she believed that it was her daughter. I chose not to investigate the home, with the reason being that if she truly believed that it was her daughter, there really wasn't any harm in it. I kept in touch with her to make sure that she wasn't doing anything weird or anything crazy, but she firmly believed that her deceased daughter was still in the house with her and was sending her messages. It wasn't causing any harm, it wasn't hurting her, it wasn't hurting anybody else, and it was bringing her a great deal of comfort. It probably was not real. She was probably convincing herself that other things that she was hearing and seeing, okay, were causing problems. She did have people come in. She went through my checklist. She did have people come in and check her electrical and her plumbing and all of that stuff, but she was still hearing and seeing all this stuff. It could have just been grief. It may have been that she missed her daughter so much that she was convincing herself that the spirit of her daughter was still there, and that she was trying to send messages to her and trying to let her know that she was okay. That's the kind of thing that I kind of let lie. When they tell me that, I say, there's really not a whole lot there for me to investigate because those messages are for you. That's an easy out for that, because I probably wouldn't find anything. But for her, it's a great comfort. She knows her daughter is still there. She can still talk to her daughter if she wants to. And it brings her a sense of relief and a sense of peace. And it's not hurting anybody. Okay, you also want to review medications for side effects like hallucinations and dizziness. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. You could always go down and talk to your pharmacist. If you started a new medication anytime in the last 3 to 6 months, you may want to go down and talk to your pharmacist and say, hey, I was wondering, I can't find a full list of side effects that these particular medications can cause. Can you tell me if there's anything that could be happening? But you don't want to just take one. If you're on 7 different pills, don't just take one pill down to the pharmacist. Take your whole group of pills down to your pharmacist and just say, hey, look, can these cause hallucinations? Or, what kind of side effects do I need to be aware of? There could be side effects because of an interaction between 2 or 3 of the medications. It could be just one medication is causing this issue. Or what this medication is helping to solve interacts with this one that's trying to solve this one and causes you to hear whispering or something. You never know. So if you're on medications and you are hearing, seeing, whatever, go to your pharmacist and see if you can get from them if there's an interaction issue, if there's weird side effects that you need to be aware of, and then kind of go from there. If you are on a drug that can cause hallucinations, at that point you need to go to your doctor and discuss with them, do you need to stay on this medication? Is there another medication that you could try that doesn't cause hallucinations, etc., etc.? But that is going to be a conversation between you and the pharmacist, and then you and your doctor. Okay, so let's say that you do believe that your house is haunted, or you're getting ready to do an investigation in the house. What kind of tools should you have? So here are some helpful tools you can get. Carbon monoxide detector, first on the list. Moisture or mold test kit. Absolutely, you want to use that to test to make sure, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it ain't there. An EMF detector. Those are the K2 meters. They come in varying prices. You want to definitely shop around. Unfortunately, because they are such popular ghost hunting tools, as everything else that's been turned into a ghost hunting tool, they are like 3 times the price that they used to be. So shop around, just be very, very careful. If you know somebody who already has one, that's even better. You can just borrow it and kind of go from there. I've lent mine out on a bunch of occasions. Flashlight for close inspections. You want to get in there in your closet. You want to get into the nooks and crannies in your attic, in your basement. Lots of dark corners in these places. Go into your closets. Go under the beds. Get close up on your windowsills and underneath the doors. You can use it to check and see, are there actually gaps that I wasn't aware of and can't really see all that well? Get yourself a really good flashlight. Spend the money. Don't get one of those weird ones from, the grocery store that looks like a gigantic barrel and has a battery the size of your head and only lasts for 5 minutes. Get yourself a real flashlight. and a pest inspection service. In all honesty, then go for the rest of them too. It only says pest inspection service on the list, but you want to get a plumber, you want to get an electrician, you want to get a pest inspector. If you want to have a home inspector come in and do that, that's fine. But the three that you really need to spend most of your time on would be your electrical, your plumbing, and your pest control. You can also have somebody come in for HVAC to check, especially if you have central heating and air. You want to have them come in and check that. If you have a radiator, again, you want to come in and make sure that your systems are good with the radiators. Make sure that they're not making the knocking sounds. Okay, so you've made it all the way through that list. When you come to the end of it, you realize, oh wow, none of this stuff answers why I'm seeing Aunt Margaret walking down the stairs every Thursday at 3 o'clock in the morning. So what do you do now? Well, now it's time to go ahead and contact a paranormal investigation team. I am going to implore you to do your research before you call anybody in. I'm not going to nitpick, I'm not going to point anybody out, I'm not going to make any examples, but I am going to say that a lot of people who do TV shows and YouTube channels are trying to make content. Their main concern is not helping you. It's making a good video. So what you need to do is you need to find a team, preferably somebody who's local to you. And I say local because they're going to know various different issues with the area. Is there lore? Is there specific bugs that you might not have been aware of? Are there critters? Etc., etc. That's things that a local team would be more likely to know. They're also more likely to do some kind of a scientific approach. You're not going to have, men in lab coats coming in with beakers and stuff like that. That's not the kind of thing I'm talking about. You want somebody that's going to come in and they're going to have all these test kits and they're going to run all those tests before they go ahead and start investigating ghosts. They may need to come in more than one time to check. Did they get evidence this time? No. Okay, well, let them come in another time. Even if they did come in the first time and they got evidence, they might want to come in a second time to see if they still get evidence the second time. They might come in a third or a fourth time. A lot of times what they're going to do is they may film what they're doing, but not post them up anywhere. That would actually be your best bet. A team that's recording, but isn't posting it anywhere. Because they're recording to have the evidence to show you, to study themselves, to see if they can figure out what else it could possibly be other than a ghost. They're not posting it up on YouTube to make ad money. That's going to be the best. That's going to be the best outcome for you because they're not going to find something just to find something. They're not going to have an exciting video just to put out an exciting video. They're going to have what you need to know and the answers to your questions, even though it may take more than 2 or 3 hours to do that. It might take 2 or 3 visits. Be open to that. You can discuss with them. And remember, if you do pick a team and they come in and you start talking to them and you don't like them, you don't have to let them investigate. You could just say, hey, I've changed my mind. I really don't want to do this, and then move on to the next team. You're allowed to do that, and please do it if you don't think that the team has your best interest at heart. But you have to pay attention to what they're actually saying and doing. Please don't go with a team just because you really enjoy their YouTube videos, or they're your favorite TV show, or they're your favorite YouTube channel. Don't pick them just because of that. Don't pick them just because you want your 15 minutes of fame on YouTube. If you honestly believe that you are having a problem, make sure that you pick a team that has your best interest at heart. And if they have 1 million subscribers on YouTube, or they've got a huge TV show, their interest in this situation is their clicks and their views and their likes and their ad revenue. It's not you. They might care about you, but you're definitely on the bottom of the list, not the top of it. Pick a team where your best interest is the number one priority. That's how you get real answers. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you sticking in with me, and I will see you in the next video. Go down below. I will have video links to like Infrasound and stuff like that, and also all my social links are on the bottom. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.